Senator Lent, Senator Den Hartog, thanks so much for joining us this week. There was a lot of testimony over 2 days. We heard from over 100 people across the 2 hearings. Senator Lent, what testimony from the hearings was most impactful to you personally?
Well, I really enjoyed the diversity of people that we heard from. Homeschooler with her 5 boys crawling on her. That was so fun. And then, retired school teachers and administrators and just regular folks, calling in and wanting to express their opinion and their thoughts on a very important subject, which is, of course, how we fund education.
Of course. Senator Den Hartog, what stood out to you from testimony?
I think similar to Senator Lent, just the diversity of testimony. And I think we have seen how testimony has changed over the last several years with the advent of having people be able to Zoom into our meetings. And that has given a lot of life to the testimony. It's not just the people in the audience. It's this, balance between, getting to hear from people all across the state versus the people that are able to join us in person.
Of course. And ESAs are a topic that is, they're not just on the table in Idaho. It's a conversation that's happening all over the country. This is a program that's established based somewhat on other states. Senator Lent, before the committee vote, you said something along the lines of this bill is going 0 to 60. What did you mean by that? And can you tell me some of your concerns about the legislation?
Sure. Chairman Yamamoto and I had the opportunity to go to Arizona. Arizona is referred to as like the model when it comes to choice education, and we had the good fortune to sit down with one of the lead legislators who championed and has for many years their legislation. And one of the things he communicated to us was it's a process and a journey, this particular thing, and it really sunk in. As this piece of legislation that we have before us now, it really starts at where Arizona is now and moves even further forward. So there really isn't any warm-up to this, so to speak, at least in my perspective. And I think to have success in this, the leadership principle is you want to bring people along with you. And the way this came off, at least the current legislation, from my perspective, it didn't allow for that. It was, here it is, here we go, here's the whole enchilada, and off we go.
And Senator Den Hartog, you voted in favor of the bill, in support of it, but you talked about some differences that you would have made if you had drafted the legislation. Can you tell me about that? Yeah,
so similar to Senator Lent and the idea that there's a process and we take incremental steps. What we've seen in other states is this more incremental approach, and so some of the things in the legislation that I thought, maybe that, again, had I drafted it, I wouldn't have included it. The legislation allowed rollover of the savings to be able to pay for college expenses or tuition. We have some programs that address some of that now, and we're talking about others. The other consideration, I think transportation's an eligible expense. I heard that come up as that wasn't one that I was necessarily concerned about. And then the idea that it was immediately open to all families. And my primary concern has been for the families that don't have choice right now. How can we help them have some of the opportunities that families with means already have? And I think that's part of how I would have structured it differently, similar to our Empowering Parents current micro-grant program, where the money goes out. Anyone can apply, but the money goes out based on your income levels, and it addresses those in the lower to middle income levels first and sends money to them first.
And so with those qualifiers acknowledged, what pushed you to a yes vote?
Yeah. This has been a space that I've worked in for a long time, and I feel very, very passionately about. And not everybody has arrived at the same place at the same time, and that's normal in this legislative process. I think, what I've been reading in news reports, people are like, oh, it's all this national push, these outside forces and outside entities, and I'd be like, wait a minute, there's been those of us in school choice working in this arena in the state for a long time, and we've been making those incremental steps. So maybe we didn't have some of the same things in place that Arizona had or other states have had for a while, but for me, this is the right moment and the right time, even if it isn't exactly what I would have drafted myself.
And the Arizona ESA program, which this is partially based on, began specifically as a program for special education and special needs and students with disabilities. That was a topic that came up a lot over the course of the testimony. Chairman Lant, what did the issues around disabilities, how did that weigh into your calculation?
Well, there was a lot of uncertainty in the testimony. People were testifying that it was going to be a difference, it wasn't going to be a difference. Certain schools did it, certain other schools didn't. The federal programs, if they're not part of the private school, then they're not going to be part of the program. So what I'd really say is that we need to have apples for apples here. And that is, if we're going to allow money to go outside of the public system currently, then we should expect the same kind of services and other things provided by those schools as well. Likewise, the inverse of that would be, since this particular program has no requirements for reporting back, no accountability associated with it, the inverse of that would be, well, could we say that our current public system no longer requires any reporting back on student achievement as well? I think if we looked at it from that perspective, many people would say, no, that's not what we want to do. So while I think I have always been in favor of finding the right situation for students. When I was on the school board in Idaho Falls, we took a junior high and converted it into a project-based high school because we felt like our students and parents needed more flexibility and options. We wanted the right fit. And we knew that there are many situations that traditional comprehensive high schools weren't meeting for a certain number of students. So, when you talk about the different options we have, from career technical, just in my district in Idaho Falls, career technical, alternative high schools, comprehensive high schools, the middle schools that specialize in different things as well as private schools. And we have very successful charter schools in our district as well. Mm-hmm. Alturas Academy and American Heritage, both are very successful and growing.
There are a lot of choices within the existing public system that Idaho has set up. Senator Den Hartog, school choice has been part of your legislative wheelhouse for your tenure in the Senate. Tell me about how the conversation around school choice has changed over the years.
We've tried a lot of different things. We've tried bringing a lot of different legislation, and we've had a lot of success, and we've had some failures along the way too. Some of those were things that other states have been successful in. Several years ago, we had an attempt at a tax credit scholarship program. That ultimately was not something that made it across the finish line, but we've had a lot of success, particularly around the charter school space, and people forget that those are public schools, and we've seen a lot of innovation and a lot of creativity. One of the things that struck me about the conversation that I think we're missing is as we're talking about something like an ESA, I think we're so focused on what currently exists, we forget that this has the potential to really unleash innovation and creativity in a way that we maybe don't even understand yet. And we saw some of that in the pandemic with micro schools or families joining together, some of these things that we just had never even considered as a possibility. And I think that's what's exciting to me in this choice space is what's going to happen that we don't even know exists yet. And that is really exciting to me. And that really was a similar conversation when we had the charter school debate, over 20 years ago. People were afraid, they were worried it was going to damage our existing traditional public schools, and we haven't seen that happen, but we've seen a lot of creativity and a lot of innovation.
I want to move now to the question of the price tag for the program. The sponsors are asking for about $45 million to start this up. An earlier version of the bill would have covered fewer students for a smaller price tag. Senator Lant, what do you think of the calculations going into this, and what do you think we'll see with this program if it were to continue into the future? There are questions about how much the costs may increase.
Well, that's a great question. So a lot of what we've seen has to do with the initial startup. And what I've tried to do is look at 5 years down the road and look at those states, Indiana, Arizona, Wisconsin, Ohio, and see where they are now that they have some runtime on them. And maybe learn from their experience as well, benchmark them. And what we're seeing is it's really in the hundreds of millions of dollars that's being spent additionally. And while I support the idea, where I struggle is initially the narrative and the concept is that people will move to these better schools when in reality the existing schools don't close down. And a lot of the students that participate in these programs are already in private schools to start with. So there's a smaller majority of students who are moving. Although we do have students moving from the public system, a large share of the students are already in private schools. So you end up essentially, and that's, I guess, if you were to ask me why did I vote no, it goes something like this. You end up essentially creating a dual system there, another system of schools that you are now funding, which gets very expensive in the long run. So that's the question. And if there's, I do believe that there is some room here. If you lead into that question, where do we go from here? And I think there is a space where this could come together and there could be a solution. The good senator and I just had a meeting here over the lunch hour talking with others about opportunities to bring some of the best together in some of our programs and see if there isn't somewhere in the middle that we can meet so that we can satisfy what we're trying to do, at the same time maintain some accountability, maintain some consistency, but allow the innovation and flexibility that I think we all seek as well.
Sure. Let's talk about that innovation a little bit. There are the existing school choice options within the public school system, like charters, et cetera. An ESA program would maybe open some more options outside of the system. Senator Den Hartog, at what point will we know we've done it and we have enough school choice?
I think when we hear from parents and families that they're satisfied. I think most people are happy with their public schools. I don't think we haven't heard an outcry, but what we have heard, and I heard this from constituents throughout the pandemic primarily, who when they had their eyes opened and were forced into another option through that time, some of that schooling at home, they were like, oh, we could do this. This would be great. I had never thought about doing it. I never thought it was possible. And education is changing, and I think we talk about like the unbundling of education. We know this intuitively, that how we learn and where we learn, it can happen in so many different ways, and I feel like we've tried to restrict it to these walls or to this box, and that's where it's difficult to kind of come out of that and see what that looks and feels like. And it's a little scary. It's a little unknown.
Of course.
But I would say we may never know. And I hope we always continue to innovate in education. Education should be leading the pack in innovation.
Unfortunately, we are out of time and we are going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry.
Oh, I have some great things to say.